Welcome everybody today to the Trachtenberg School Alumni Panel on careers in state, county, local government. I am so thrilled that we have alumni from here locally, DC and Maryland, to Boston, to Colorado, to Oregon and California. So we have alumni all over the country to share about their career paths, their current work, and answer your questions. And I am continually indebted to our alumni and their graciousness in giving back, and just thank you all for being here today. And to all of our students, alumni, and I think we have some admitted students that are here today joining us too. So with that, I'm going to ask each of the alumni, I've asked them to just do a couple minutes of an introduction about their career path and what they do before we open up the questions. You're welcome to start putting questions into the chat when we get to that stage, or you can ask your questions yourself. And Rhonda, you were the first one to log on. I'm going to start right here, close to home with DC.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Rhonda Cheatham. I currently serve as the Chief of Management Operations for DC's Office of the Chief Financial Officer. I completed my program, my MPA program, as my kids like to say, in the 1900s. And so they're so disrespectful. But as soon as when I finished my program, I actually came into the District of Columbia as a special assistant for the then first ever office Office of the Chief Financial Officer. Some may know that this position is independent and it was established by Congress after years of fiscal abuse in the city. And so Congress appointed a chief financial officer. I stayed there for a little while, and then I moved on to New Orleans, where I served as the director for small and emerging businesses until Hurricane Katrina. And I came back home, and flirted with in the nonprofit sector, and did a little bit of consulting. As I mentioned, I do have those kids, and consulting and kids really don't go well together. And so I entered into the government again, and I have been now with DC government, and specifically the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, since 2010, about 2010. And I also serve in my spare time, whatever that looks like. I am the president for the Government Finance Officers Association for the DC metropolitan area. We have scholarships, and so does the national organization. So I just want to throw that out. For those who have at least one more year in their program, there's money out there. And that's me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Rebecca, we're going to go to you next.
Sounds good. Thank you, Denise, for having me. It's so good to see everyone and to be in such great company. My name is Rebecca Bizzari. I started out my career at GW. I was actually a double GW alum. I first started studying international development with a focus on women's economic development. And then I pivoted and did my master's in public administration with a focus on budget and public finance. I was one of those weird people in your budgeting classes that was like, wow, I really love this stuff. I like these spreadsheets. I like seeing how money impacts people's lives and how we can make smart financial investments. And so as I was thinking about my career after grad school, I actually attended a career event similar to this one where I learned about the Department of Budget and Management within the state of Maryland. And that's where I ended up. I've been here for about 4 years now. I'm a principal budget analyst within the state of Maryland. What that means is essentially I have a portfolio of agencies. In my case, I work with the Maryland Department of Health, specifically the Maryland Medicaid program, which serves about 1.5 million Marylanders and giving them access to health insurance. My job is to analyze financial data and policy and essentially make recommendations to the governor on how we will fund different initiatives within the Department of Health and my other state agencies. So it's been a really exciting time. I've had the privilege of working for Maryland during a gubernatorial transition, as well as the latest presidential transition. It's been a really interesting time to be in state government. I am local to Maryland, so I'd love to speak more later on about the benefits of it, working within your local community and being able to pour into the community that you grew up in. I think that's one of the special aspects of my experience in state government. So thank you all.
Love that. Fantastic. Molly, we'll move over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Molly Morley. Thank you so much for having me. And I am currently the Senior Advisor for Youth Programs at the Boston Housing Authority. So I graduated from GW almost exactly a decade ago with my MPP, and I started out actually in the international development field. So just a week after graduating, I picked up and moved to Turkey, lived abroad for many years, and then I was working on program evaluation all those years for State Department and USAID programs. And then COVID happened, which I'm sure for many of you was a life-changing event, really helped me reevaluate my priorities and what I wanted to work on. And that's when I decided to move back to the US and shift my focus to domestic work, specifically affordable housing. So I started out in the nonprofit sector, working for a national nonprofit, Enterprise Community Partners, on program evaluation of housing and community development programs. And then just a little over a year ago, started working for the Boston Housing Authority. And I oversee the BHA's initiative to essentially support youth who grow up in BHA housing to ensure there are economic mobility opportunities for youth as they grow up in our housing, and they can achieve economic mobility once they graduate from high school and pursue careers. And so this is a very new initiative for the BHA. It is wonderful, and I'm so excited to be like integrated in the community and doing this work. It's also very daunting at the same time. So happy to answer any questions about that.
Fantastic. This is interesting already. We're only halfway through our intros. Scott.
Morning, everybody. My name is Scott Dosick, and I, like Rhonda, I finished GW in the 1900s. Yeah, so I got my MPA back in 1996. Funny story, when I was there was during the Clinton administration, very different times, and the president's spokesperson was Dee Dee Myers. And if anybody ever watched The West Wing, C.J. Craig was modeled after Dee Dee Myers, and so every night I turned on the news and I would see Dee Dee. Fast forward 30-ish years, Dee Dee is now my boss here as the director of the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development here in California. So it's just funny how sometimes things go full circle. So anyway, I got my MPA in 96 through GW, through the career office. I was able, I don't think it's called the co-op program anymore, but was able to take advantage of the co-op program to get my first civil service job with the Environmental Protection Agency. Did that for about 6 years. And oh, Rhonda, we'll have to catch up. We probably had classes together back in the day. And then so I worked for the EPA for about 6 years, and then I had an opportunity to move back to California. I grew up here to work for then Governor Davis to help oversee California's beverage container recycling program, the bottle bill, which I know my Oregon colleagues are familiar with bottle bills. And so I did that for about 5 years, and then Governor Davis got recalled by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so I did consulting for 10 years, and then really missed being back in public service and civil service. And I came back as an analyst for this new program that was being launched in California called the California Competes Tax Credit, basically an incentive program to keep businesses from leaving California or incentivize them to onshore jobs from overseas, or to help us compete with evil states like Arizona, Nevada, and God forbid Texas that love stealing California jobs. And so started out as an analyst with that program back in 2014, and then in 2020, Governor Newsom appointed me to be the deputy director of this program. So I've been here at GoBiz for the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, GoBiz, for the last 11 years. So happy to talk to folks about GoBiz, about how to get California state jobs in general. And then my evening job, I serve as a school board member in a local school district here in Sacramento. So I'll just do a plug for if anyone is even remotely interested in education, there is a massive nationwide teacher shortage. You can have a full-time job as a teacher, basically as soon as you finish your credentialing program. And in California, in Natomas, in my school district, we will actually pay for you to get your credential program. And if you move into our school district, we'll give you a housing stipend on top of that because we really want you to come and teach in our district. So I think I stuck to my 3 minutes, Denise. Let me know.
Fantastic. Now I want to go out there and become a teacher.
Excellent.
Peter, we'll go to move to you, staying on the West Coast.
Yes, I'll say good morning, even though I know it's afternoon for you. Yeah, I'm the city manager in the city of Albany, Oregon, and Albany's a town of about 60,000 people. We have what's called a full service city. In other words, we have police, fire, public works, library, community development, HR, finance, IT, city attorney, a wide variety of functions and services that this city provides. I answer to a 7-member council, a city council, a mayor and 6 councilors representing 3 different wards. I will often define or describe my job as an apolitical job in a very political environment. And the purpose, if you remember your public administration history, is that the council manager form of government was started in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And by the way, I too got my MPA in the 1900s. But the council manager form of government was intended to address the corruption and nepotism at the time and professionalize the administration of the city government, while leaving the council to address the political and to appropriate monies for operation of the government and to determine the future, the strategic plan for the city. I arrived at this job in a very atypical way. I was a military officer for 30 years. In those 30 years, I moved 15 times, so all over the country and overseas. I was a Coast Guard helicopter pilot. And for anybody that was or is a veteran, you know that if you're lucky enough to have been continually promoted, eventually you're promoted out of your specialty and into very senior leadership positions. So few people realize that if you reach the 30-year mark and you haven't been selected for general or admiral, you have to retire. I got to that point at the Pentagon, and I didn't want to turn around and take off my uniform and put on a coat and tie and work for a defense contractor. So I looked around and I took a look back at my history, my experience, my education, and I thought, wow, what about managing at the local level? I applied to ports and counties and cities. Finally, I got an offer as deputy city manager in the little town of Bothell, Washington. I was there for 3.5 years when the council fired my boss while he was on vacation in Mexico with his daughter. The best advice I got entering this line of work was never take anything personally. You have to be willing to deal with things like that. And I began looking for another job, and I ended up here in Albany. That was about 8 years ago, which is twice as long as I've lived anywhere else in my adult life. But it's a really good job, and I would recommend it to anybody.
I love those stories. This is great. Laurel, bring it home.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Laurel Varnell, and I am currently the director for the Office of Housing Recovery for the state of Colorado. So that's within the Department of Local Affairs here. And I've been here about 2.5 months. So it's a brand new position for me. Colorado is also a brand new state for me. Prior to that, I was at Sarasota County, Florida. I actually graduated from Trachtenberg in 2020, and the world was shutting down, and I applied for an ICMA fellowship, so International City Managers Association fellowship. Got an offer in Sarasota, and I thought, why not move to Florida for a year when the world was shutting down? And that was one of the best decisions I could have made because it really jump-started my career. So I got to Florida in the summer of 2020 and immediately started working on our CARES Act program. So like many local governments and state governments across the country, we got inundated with federal funds coming to help with responses to the COVID pandemic. So I was in the right place at the right time and started running our small business grant program for Sarasota County, and was able to expend $50 million into the community in about 3 months, which at the time was unprecedented. And then after that, the county received $23 million in rental assistance funds for the emergency rental assistance program, and was fortunate enough to be asked to be the program manager for that program. And I did that for 2 years, expended both of those ERA 1, ERA 2 funding sources, helping renters recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. And Sarasota County, as you may know, is susceptible to hurricanes. So we were hit by Hurricane Ian, and received $200 million in Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds from HUD. a few years ago. So I was asked to run that program and did that for about a year before deciding to relocate to Colorado. And I took a little bit of a leap of faith where I decided I was done living in Florida, moved to Colorado, and really could not have landed a better spot for me now. My current role, I'm overseeing an affordable housing trust fund that the state of Colorado has. It was a ballot initiative passed a few years ago. So we're trying to incentivize local governments to build more affordable housing in the area. I also oversee an emergency mortgage assistance program, which is a COVID program. So we're in the last year or so of spending that funding source. And we have a emergency rental assistance program that started as COVID funding, and now we're transitioning to a regular funding source. So realized the impact was so great for Colorado that the legislature decided to pass permanent funding sources. So I oversee those programs, and we are in the process of hiring a new disaster recovery program manager who will be looking at housing needs in a disaster. So there's wildfires that hit Colorado, and so during a time of disaster, this position would be responding from a housing needs to help folks. So the position actually just came down, but we're reposting it. So I'll be sure to share it with this network too when that comes along. That's a really great way to get into state government. So with that, I will turn it back over to Denise.
Oh, that's great to hear, Laura. Definitely send it my way and we'll send it out via the Hot Jobs listserv. This is what I always love. And I remember you sitting in my office, not sure whether or not to take the position in Florida. We went back and forth. So to me, it's just wonderful to see this. So I would love to open this up to questions for all of you. I am sure we have a lot of people today. You can either put something in the chat or raise your hand now to ask questions to anybody specific or to the group. If it's something really specific, I would encourage you to think about the small groups. But let's see who has the first question. I am sure that there are questions. I mean, I certainly can start, but this is for all of you. So did someone have a question?
Yeah.
Great.
Sorry. My name is Rebecca. I am a GW Trachtenberg student, focusing on getting my MPP. And this is a bit of a silly question, but I think for many of us, we've kind of progressed in our years when it comes to aging. Is it ever too late, or are you ever too old to begin a career in state and local governments? I think occasionally when looking at your peers, especially if you're someone who doesn't have experience in that arena, it can feel inaccessible, depending on how old you are. Do you have any advice with kind of grappling with that insecurity, or at the very least, kind of connotations on whether or not it's possible to start out in lower levels and still make a stable career within state and local government?
Thanks, Denise. I would say no. It's definitely not the case that it's too late, or rarely would I ever say it's too late. I went into local government after a 30-year military career, so I was about 53 or 54 at the time. What I would say though is maybe that's something that you might not think of is the willingness to move, to have some geographic flexibility increases your chances substantially of finding a job in local government. There's a saying that once you've seen one city, you've seen one city. They're all different. And each state is a different structure for cities, and the councils change over time. So if you're looking for a job as a city manager, that's just something you gotta be persistent about applying. Sometimes when you look, you lower your sights a little bit and apply for a deputy city manager or for a department head of some type. It also increases your chances. But age, I wouldn't let age hold me back at all.
And I can dovetail off of what Peter was saying. And Peter might even be able to, let me know my, like, 'cause I've only lived in 6 or 7 cities, so I know 6 or 7 cities. Um, my experience has been that local city governments and counties tend to have a little more flexibility in their hiring. At least in the state of California, it's a pretty rigid process. There's kind of two paths to get into state government. The one is the regular civil service process. You take an exam, you score high enough, you're eligible to apply, but the entrance requirements for some of the higher paying exams tend to be skewed towards existing employees in a promotional pattern, unless you go the governor's appointment route or getting appointed by another constitutional officer. But my experience, just in terms of jobs that I've seen here, I'm in Sacramento, California, or with my local school district, we don't have those same restrictions if you have relevant job experience, even if it's not working in local or state government. There's a greater ability to hire at higher levels. Either one, like California, one of the great things about California, whether it's local or state government, is we have a phenomenal pension program here. So like with the state of California, even if you're starting now, like, mid-career shift or even later career, yeah, you get 2% of your salary, of your highest 3-year salaries, for every year that you work for the state of California. And so if your top 3 years, you end up making $100,000 a year, your pension's going to be $2,000 for every year that you work until you retire at 62. If you work 10 years for the state of California, you get a partial medical benefits when you retire. And if you do 20 years with the state, you get full medical benefits when you retire for you and your spouse or the significant other for the rest of your lives. So I've got the platinum handcuffs right now because I've got about uh, 15 years of state service. So I got to go at least another 5 years, get my 20 for the full medical until I figure out what I want to do when I grow up.
I would add, that's cute. I would add that age is actually an asset, and better yet, or better put, life experience is an asset. When I graduated from the program, truthfully, I was young and did not have that life experience, and I had all this academic knowledge, and I came in a kind of arrogant posture that I was going to save the world, and they're like, "Pipe down, little girl, pipe down," and their life experiences gave context to the book knowledge that I had, and those became my informal mentors. Like when you're starting to consider things like eminent domain, you want to approach it more like a formula. And then there are people that have to come around you and say, let me give you a holistic view beyond just your public policy class that you did, Rhonda. Let me give you a holistic view of why this is either good or bad. And I had to go through that twice here in DC, as we have, two stadiums. The baseball stadium was the first one where I was trying to just like, I know what's best. And they're just like, yeah, 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 little girl. No one called me little girl. No one said that. No one was that bad, but that was the essence of it. I think that age in life experience actually gives context to how these policies and decisions are made in local and state government, and those viewpoints are welcomed in the career space.
Laura, you want to add before we go to the next question?
Yeah, I'll just add quickly. So just a plug for kind of starting at the bottom and working your way to the top. So before I did my ICMA fellowship, I did the district leadership program internship with DC government. And so that's kind of how I started my career in local government. And after a few months into that, was offered a full-time job with DC government. And the same thing happened to me with the fellowship, as I did my fellowship, and after about 6 months, was offered a full-time job with Sarasota County. So I think there's something to be said to, if you show up, you work hard, you network and volunteer to be on every committee and do anything that you want to do. People see that and they recognize it. So I think there's something to be said. If you're excited about it, people really, the local government sphere really wants to foster that and kind of create that community. So I would say, especially if you're looking for something, don't be like I took an internship and it was a step down from when I came to Trachtenberg. I'd already kind of had several careers before that. So for me, it felt like a step down. And then I was very quickly worked my way kind of up in this realm of state and local government. So just a plug, don't be afraid to take something that's a little bit different, but say yes to every opportunity. And like I said, if you're there, you're showing up and working hard, people do recognize that and will reward that.
Great. We have a question. Somebody raised your hand, and then we'll go to some of the ones that we have in the chat. So Carlos, we'll go to you first because I think you raised your hand before some of the ones coming in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you again for the panelists for, your guys' words of wisdom. I guess my question relates to that kind of networking in the DC area. I know state, local, county government, it's wide reaching everywhere in this country. How would you guys recommend going about making connections, especially in the nation's capital when you're so far removed from somewhere like Oregon or California, Colorado? Because I know Colorado specifically, there's, certain residency requirements for getting state jobs. So I guess, yeah, how would you guys go answer that?
When you want to chime in on that?
I can jump in first. I'm a little biased because I am local. I was in DC and then moved back to Maryland for my role. So I'll let some of the other panelists speak to your latter question. But I would say going about your networking, I think you're already doing a great thing by attending events like these. Denise is a wealth of knowledge, and so is the Trattenberg alumni community. There is no shortage of expertise within the GW community. You paid to be a part of it. You should at least leverage everything that it can offer. So don't be afraid to go to events, take the emails that Denise shares, follow up. It sounds simple, but it's not. And I think as long as you're engaging with folks with a spirit of curiosity and interest, people want to help you. I connected with many Trattenberg and GW alum that led me to my role. I do that a lot. We have a thriving kind of pathway of Trattenberg students that now work in my office as well. So don't be afraid to reach out. We're all a part of this community for that reason. And I would say when you're doing that, cast a wide net. I think you're taking a lot of different classes. You might have a really particular idea of what you want to work on, but as we've seen over the past 5 years, the world changes so frequently. Things that we think about now, we weren't thinking about 5 years ago. And I've been fortunate in my career to have doors open where I consider things that I never once knew to dream about. So when you're going to events like these or when you're reaching out to people on LinkedIn, don't be afraid to cast a wide net in terms of people that you're speaking with. Even if you don't want their exact job, they still might have a valuable resource or know someone who can get you closer to an office that you're interested in.
And I'll just say, because I know you mentioned Colorado does have a residency requirement for many state jobs. The one I'm posting, I actually petitioned for an out-of-state waiver because it's so specialized. So for the state of Colorado, at least, and I'm assuming elsewhere, they do exist, although they are infrequent. For me, though, definitely networking. I don't know how many people I talked to, but it was a lot of Trachtenberg, GW, anyone kind of that was in the ICMA community. So really leveraging all those networks were helpful. But for me, I knew I wanted to be in Denver. My partner had relocated to Denver. So I relocated first and then started a job, which I know is probably not the norm. But for me, because I knew I wanted to geographically be somewhere, that was important to me. And then the day that I arrived in Denver, I got my driver's license and declared residency because I knew it was important to have Colorado residency to have a state job. So just a plug out there. I'm not sure though if there's other places that you're wanting to be or wanting to relocate, that may just be a little bit of a leap of faith, but there is that residency requirement. I'm curious, I don't know if that exists in other places, but I know that has been kind of a tension with Colorado that I would be curious if you may start seeing more out-of-state jobs for the state of Colorado.
In California, you do have to live here to get a state job, but you don't have to be living here prior to that. You can establish your residency once you get hired. As far as a network, I'm going to give you kind of a weird suggestion that's worked out for me a number of times accidentally. Apply for jobs you're not qualified for. One, you might be surprised that they actually make you the offer, which happened to me once. But other than that, it's a great way to get your resume in front of people in a semi-formal kind of way. I mean, you know, I'm not saying like apply for, to be a city manager, for example, when you have absolutely no experience in local government whatsoever. You probably need a few stepping stones before that. But, there might be a supervisorial position or a senior analyst position, and they might give a lot of weight to your academic experience in addition to whatever professional experience you might have. I actually didn't get the first position I applied for at GW with the Environmental Protection Agency. It went to one of my classmates. It's foolish them because she only lasted 6 months and I was there for like 6 years. But that's another story. I'm not bitter about that. It was only 30 years ago. But they shared my resume with another program, which was then reached out to me and said, "Would you be interested in transferring your application to our program?" And that launched my civil service career back in 1994. Good Lord. So anyway, shoot resumes out there, apply for jobs. It's a great way to, sometimes you become friends with people, even though you don't get a job with them, and maybe they help you get your next job.
Ah, I love it. Okay, let me get through some of the questions. I'm going to combine these two together because I think that they are relevant. I think a lot of people are going to have a lot to say with this. Is it the most rewarding and challenging aspects of working in state and local government? And also when you first get started, how long does it take you to get up to speed with the nuances for local government, particularly if you're not coming in with experience on that? So I think those questions really fit together. So I'm going to put that out there to our panelists.
Well, let me use that opportunity to emphasize what Scott just said about applying for jobs for which you think you might not be qualified. He accepted city management, I would say, even including city management, with perhaps a realistic understanding of what it is that you're getting into. If you remember, I lowered my sights from city manager to deputy city manager, and I got that job. I had to make a case in my application materials for how much that military experience was equivalent in terms of leadership, in terms of strategic planning, in terms of managing resources. So, but there's no way to get around the fact that I really, when I did get into that world of work, I really had to rely upon the people who were already there, who were subject matter experts, take an air of humility and tackle this very steep learning curve that I was facing. But it gets back to I think, to the importance of being willing to be a lifelong learner and take a few risks. I think if you have the leadership ability and you have the desire to serve and you have an ability to learn quickly, there's almost no limits on how you can change your career path. So I would agree and encourage people to do that.
Love to hear from others on this.
I
Pros,
can jump in.
cons. Yeah.
I would add to that, being present in the community. So all of our jobs, what we're here for is to serve the residents, to serve taxpayers, to make sure that their interests are represented and they have what they need from their local government. Go to the community meetings, make sure you're talking to people, make sure they know who you are. And that is also a component of like the networking piece, like you're networking with the community and not just people in government. And I will say for the city of Boston, our MO is they love hiring people from local organizations that are involved in the community. Like that is one of the biggest hiring pools for the city. So even if you're not immediately working for local government, like work for a community focused organization that knows what's going on, is involved in like the grassroots of what's happening in the city. That is a key part to like the learning curve of any city or local government job, is making sure you are ingrained and involved in the community, because that's your day-to-day work. And I will say that's one of the most rewarding part of the jobs, is that, you are an active piece of how the city or the location that you work in runs and how it's meeting everyone's needs and interests day to day. So I would say the community focus is really important. And that I think is what distinguishes a lot of people too, is are they willing to go that extra mile and be involved in the community and not just like, clocking in and out day to day.
Denise, I want to chime in really quickly to say like one tangible tip, if you're worried about not having like a local expertise or state expertise for a job that you're applying for, I think one way that can help you kind of feel more confident going into an interview is checking out like local and state specific newsletters, policy letters. In the state of Maryland, we have a lot of great ones based out of Baltimore or Maryland Matters. I remember when I was kind of honing in on working in the state of Maryland, I started following those email subscriptions, and it helped me develop a familiarity with the community so that I could speak in an educated manner in my interviews. So I'm sure there are relevant kind of applicable letters elsewhere that you can just find through a quick Google search.
I would add also, with regards to the job search and the networking, professional associations, I think can have could be great. So, as I mentioned in the opening, Government Finance Officers Association, which I oversee the regional area, but in the national area, of course, then there's women in government, there's Blacks in government, there's always something. And they're all, especially if you're trying to get to DC, they all have some type of legislative branch or arm in those associations trying to get to this area. So I encourage you to join a professional association to enhance your networking, your network, as opposed. But going to the question of the most, what's challenging and rewarding in the DC area, the challenges for me are the politics. That DC being a big small town, it's and it's known for its cliquishness, and it's the CFO for the city is probably the only one in the nation that has to have its own security detail, just like a mayor would. Like that's just the nature of DC. I did not share in my opening remarks exactly what I do, but the OCFO is broken into 3 business units and 6 clusters. I oversee one of the larger clusters, which have about my operation is 115 finance and administrative personnel. We provide financial services to 39 of the district government agencies with a combined portfolio of 3.2 billion and 60% of the capital projects of the city. There's a whole lot of politics in that. And again, we're separate from the programmatic mission. We do not report to the mayor. And so when things are happening on that side, we're just like, oh crap, now we got to find money. And we're trying to keep people out of jail. That's the big part. We're trying to keep you out of jail. When we say no, it's so you don't go to jail. And that is the most challenging part. The politics of DC creep themselves into the program and the mission, and then we are scrambling on the finance side to make things legally happen. The most rewarding part, I would say, is the people. In my capacity, I'm also responsible for my office. I oversee some of the training, making sure that we have a ready, willing, and able workforce, of course, that we're properly resourced and trained, and that also involves progressive discipline. And I like to tell people when they come to me, like, do you want to talk to the CMO or do you want to talk to Rhonda? Because there are 2 different messages, and those who are willing to talk to Rhonda, you could help them. And it's usually a younger demographic that you're having to kind of mold into this. And I don't want to say a government mindset, but it's, so it's like they're comparing to their life to their friends who are in corporate. It's 2 different worlds, 2 different beasts, 2 different animals. And so growing these young professionals and how they can survive without being written up, 3 times in their first year, that is the most rewarding part. It's like, let me help you keep your job. Yeah, that's my 2 pieces.
One of the questions that came in earlier, Scott, were you going to say something?
I think it's been covered. I'm just looking at the time, like we're good.
There's a question then that came in that I think might be a really good one to wrap up, that I think is really helpful for people. In particular, and I know, Scott, you answered this one online, but I'm sure other people have some insights on this, or you might have some additional ones. For roles within local and state government, are there some key skills or personal qualities you prioritize when hiring? You all have addressed this a little bit, but specifically, and also we have some alum on in today's program. We also have some students. If you were thinking about right now, they're in school, is there some training or experience you would recommend that they focus on getting I know in DC, there's programs where they can actually start to do within the fellowships or internships while they're here in the area, or actually, and there's a lot of different local government in this area. But while they're here to get positions, to be able to work in local and state government.
Laurel, did you take a local government management fellowship from ICMA? That's I would recommend ICMA as a very good resource for anybody interested in local government. And it's not just the local government management fellowship. There's a wide variety of offerings that ICMA has.
Just add to that too, going to the ICMA conferences. So they have a national conference that's giant every year. They have all over the country, and then they are also local chapters. So one of my, actually the ICMA fellow who came to Sarasota after me went to a Florida chapter of ICMA and went right up to the county administrator and said, I'm moving to Sarasota. I really want a job. How can you help me? And she ended up becoming the next ICMA fellow for Sarasota County. So there's something to be said about just showing up some of these places. The ICMA is a great resource. And I think there's something to be said about having that experience, if it's an internship or even if it's your capstone project, something that's connecting you to local government. So I think that's so important to just be able to have that perspective when you're applying for jobs, even if it's not in a formal capacity, something more informal like a capstone or networking that you're able to pull from, I think is huge. It's really just local government, I think is different from a lot of other sectors. And I think having that perspective is helpful. And then I'll just add on to, being willing to kind of, I didn't think that local government was going to be quite as political as it is. And as I learned very quickly. So I think that's just my kind of words of wisdom, is to be, you're going to have to navigate some politics in local government, no matter where you are, what level. That's just part of it. So those are just my my piece of advice.
Before the next person chimes in, just to remind anybody who's a Trachtenberg student, we offer professional development funds for people to apply to pay for conferences. And I'm always dismayed that not more people take advantage of that opportunity, whether it's a local one for ICMA or the national one. Think about it, it will open up again in the spring. So let me see what other insights people have to this question around skills, expertise that people should get.
I can jump in. I'm pretty involved with the recruitment and hiring in my office. And I think that's something that always sets someone apart when they're applying to jobs for the state of Maryland, particularly within the budget and policy side of things, is really showing your initiative and your ability to own something. I think that Trachtenberg sets you up with a lot of great opportunities through those group projects, through your capstone. Even though you might think of it, it's just a school project, that's really an opportunity for you to talk how you took a project from the beginning to the end, how you engaged stakeholders, how you dealt with feedback, how you collaborated with other people. They sound simple, but you would be surprised how many people can't speak to those things. And when folks can, and they can really demonstrate the results or the impact of that work, it goes a long way. So definitely engage your career counseling on, how to talk to those things in your resume and in interviews, and display how you've shown initiative. I think that would really go a long way.
I would like to piggyback off what Scott said. I saw in the chat, he said, if, analytical skills, if you can think and if you can communicate, that is a premium in DC government. DC is not a state, but it has state functions, city and county functions. And so we know that you coming from Maryland, for example, or coming from Colorado, it's not the same. How you do your budget, how your financial systems are set up are not the same. And so we have to teach you. We have no choice but to teach you. So we just need people who have strong critical thinking skills, analytical skills, and just can keep up, just keep up. And of course, communication. If you don't know how to share, communicate, instruct, train, you will suffer. So I would suggest people hone their communication skills to know what they can do and articulate it well.
I would second that, and then add to Rebecca's point on the initiative, the resourcefulness. Like, local government is not always glamorous. It can be if you get a really great policy win and things work, but there's a lot of drudge work involved in it. There's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of convincing people of things. You need to know how to convince people to go from a no to a yes. You need to be resourceful when something falls through and find a fix for it. And you can't just expect it to be fixed for you. So on top of the initiative, like showing you're going to go the extra mile and be resourceful and find a solution to something, because local government is not always going to hand you a solution to anything, and you have to be able to fix it yourself a lot of the time. So showing that experience in your interviews and showing that on your resume is really important and helps people stand out in the hiring process.
Molly seconded Rhonda, so I'll third Rhonda and add one other little bit of our 7 values in the city. It's the first time I've seen one of the value statements of an organization talk about the importance of a sense of humor. And when we hire, that's actually something we look for, is people who don't take themselves too seriously and are able to look at life in a little bit lighter mood.
I love that. I actually think that that's how we should end today's The Panel. That is fantastic. I remember when I had my interview for my job here, it was about a 6-7 hour interview, and Professor Brinkerhoff asked near the end, what's something we don't know about you that you haven't shared yet today? And I said, I tell the worst jokes and the worst puns. So it sounds like, Peter, if I wanted to, I could come get a job out in your area.
We have some good dad jokes.
Oh, my husband says I have the best. That's pretty pathetic, but true. This was really tremendous. I really want to thank all of our panelists for providing their insights from each of your unique perspectives. So really, I say this all the time. Over and over, we have the best alumni. They are just not only doing such incredible work in the community, but the graciousness with which you all share job opportunities. I posted, Rebecca is going to be doing a presentation next week. They're going to anticipate hiring 7 jobs at the state of Maryland for budget. Laurel's going to share a job with us. People are continually giving back in this way, and I can't thank you all enough. With this, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.